to start the recording and the streaming, and then we're ready to start.
Recording in progress.
No.
This meeting is broadcasted and will be available later. If you're not happy with this, please let us know. Thank you. So a warm welcome to you all, and thank you for turning up. Apologies first of all. And when? Kay Jones, Councillor Ifor Glyn Lloyd, and Naomi Thompson. And Elliw Owen can't attend either. So I'll take item 6 on the agenda. We've just heard that Kim has finished as a member this morning. Is that accurate? Yes, she's told me this morning that she's resigning from today onward. Okay. Could we please all thank Kim for her time with us? And Ifor has had an accident yesterday, fire. I've spoken to him yesterday. There aren't any injuries, but a shed. He's lost about 500 reeds, but he can't attend today. I'm sure we sympathise with him as well. Declarations of interest. If not, there is a declaration of interest. Mike Slow, is it? In relation to... Joe, can you just confirm?
Yeah, of course. Let me just find the number.
Sorry, Joe, I didn't hear your name properly.
Yeah, I'll be declaring an interest on item reference NP2/11/52L. And this will be both personal and prejudicial due to my partner's work, so I'll be leaving the meeting at that point.
Thank you. Any further declarations of interest? If not, we'll move on to the minutes. I'll propose that they're accurate. Will anybody confirm? Second? Seconded. Are there any matters arising? If not, everyone agreed that they're accurate. We'll therefore move on. Excuse me, Chair. Louise?
Yeah, can I just deud...
Can I just say...
Y cyfarfod hanner awr wedi...
I have to leave...
Oh, what's midday? 12:30.
At 12:30.
Cyfarfod arall 1:00 yn Hywyn.
I have a meeting in Tywyn at 1:00.
Diolch yn fawr.
Pen-y-Pass, Nant Gwynant car park, a mast erection. Who's taking this item?
Can someone pop me in the waiting room, please?
Before we start, Jo is still in the meeting. Is it possible to send her out, please? Okay, so we're okay to go now. Who's taking this item? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Emergency services. Oh, I've got echo. For emergencies, that's difficult.
Ydy'r cyfieithydd ddim yn digwydd yn iawn, mae o'n doredig, cadeirydd. A fi di'r cadeirydd, wrth gwrs. Swyddog Monitors yn siarad dweud.
Yeah.
Take your headphones off.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Start again. This is for a 15. You can go on to the next slide. Thanks. 15-meter telecom mast, a monopole in land adjacent to the Eryri National Park car park at Penna Pass. Obviously a very sensitive site, so we've had to take quite a lot of thought over this one. It's for emergency services only. It's not for mobile phones. So we've treated it slightly differently to other mobile phone masts. Move on, please. I'll go through the slides. We do have a speaker on this, but I'll just run through the slides on this one. Now, if you can pick out what we've got there, the road going from top left to bottom right is the Pennagurid to Nantlis Road. Car park, obviously turning into the left, and the site is on a grassy area, not within the car park, but adjacent to the car park. There's the red square there, and the green is a track which will green over, and then just to the right of that, there's other red areas there, which are the equipment stores and meter boxes. And they are for the ancillary structures. So move on, please. This is from the car park, looking up towards the Wyddfa to your right, and Nant Gwynedd to the left. The mast, there's a gaggle of people on the grassy area. It's just to the right of that sort of area there, 15 meters, and you can see telegraph poles going across the sites. The meter boxes and equipment stores will be behind this black car towards on the Pennagurid, on the pig track leading up, dug into the side of the bank to help disguise them. Move on, please. So again, looking back towards Pennagurid, the youth hostel across the road, and then the our National Park building on the left. Again, it'll be the mast is just where this gaggle of people is, just in that sort of region there, and where the white, the red cattle van, that is where the equipment stores are. Move on. Looking towards where the equipment and facility stores are, is dug into that bank there. I've got a little bit more to say about that at a later stage. move on. Looking back from the pig track towards the car park, and the equipment stores are on the facility stores are on the meat box are on the left. And looking back towards the entrance, not sure why that's. Oh, this is a yes. This is a photo montage presented by the applicant. The mast is actually in that photograph. Just to the left, to the right of the yellow sign in the car park, you can see a monopole and then a telegraph pole just to the right of it. It's the monopole is as minimal as we could get it, without all sorts of things hanging off it. Because it's emergency services, we are able to keep it to minimum scale with satellite dishes, which is the norm, and other equipment hanging off the pole. So moving on, there is no doubt that it will have an impact visually. This is from the car park. It is breaking the skyline. Move on. And from the Pennagurid site, looking up, you can see the telegraph poles on the left, and then the emergency services mast on the skyline. And move on, please. And from the Nant Peris side, it will look something like that. In terms of policy, we have to consider special qualities, visual impacts, impact on nature conservation, and the special qualities. There is no doubt that there is going to be an impact visually. But as this is emergency services only, as officers, we've been able to discuss with the applicants to minimise its visual impact and hopefully present something to you that we can recommend for approval. The most important aspect of policy is probably SPG 13, which is our own publication, which defines this area as, and I have to read this, very high sensitivity to mobile phone masts, which you can understand, obviously. I mean, it's the most visited area of the national park, and we would clearly be criticised if we present something which is harmful, significantly harmful to members of the public who come there to enjoy that part of the national park. And a mobile mast in that area for mobile phones would, on that sort of criteria, would lead to a refusal, recommendation for refusal. As I keep going back, as it's emergencies only, we've been able to reduce that sensitivity to one of moderate. So, and then consider it on the basis that there is going to be an overriding public benefit, which may override. I mean, it's your decision at the end of the day whether there is an overriding public benefit over and above the visual amenity that will be lost. The applicants have submitted a landscape impact assessment with photo montages, which you've seen. There are more, and they were available. Now, their conclusions in their assessments was for minor adverse effects on natural beauty and minor to moderate adverse on visual amenity. Now, on scrutiny of their landscape visual amenity assessments by officers of this authority and of the landscape officer at Natural Resources Wales, we found that they were probably underestimating the impact of the mast, and we concluded that it was adverse effect on visual amenity. Now, the implications of that are that it follows on that the effects are regarded as significant. And again, that would normally result in a recommendation or delegated decision for refusal. But we've got to consider the implications of not allowing emergency services, which will be police, ambulance, fire, and mountain rescue. They would be the only ones who could access this mobile mast, and it provides coverage in the local area and obviously up and down Llangwynant, up towards Copper Wither, Penygurid. It doesn't reach all the way down to, because of the shadowing, down to Capel Kirrig. The position that's been chosen is the best coverage for that area along the main roads and the landscape beyond, the countryside beyond. So given this, and for, I mean, it has to be stressed, it is for this occasion only that we can reduce our tolerances to adverse, moderate adverse would be for, we can consider these for moderate adverse for emergency services only. And as I say, we've worked closely with the applicants to get the pole down to 15 metres and minimise what is hanging off the mast. So if we move on, then so I mean, everything is there for the usual ones that would lead to a refusal, but on this occasion, as I say, would lead to a reduction in our, I don't like to say standards, but our consideration for the emergency services only. Now, before I continue, we do have some amendments to make, which I would like to run through with you. We were negotiating with the applicants up until this week on Monday on reducing the impact of the mast and facilities buildings. We do have a speaker, Chairman, which you may want to hear before I continue with our amendments to the plans.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Richard. Mae Mr Norman Gillian eisiau siarad.
Mr. Norman Gillian wants to speak, so over to you.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing me to speak at Planning Committee today. My name is Norman Gillen, a member of the Sound Planning Institute and EE's planning lead for the emergency services rollout across the UK. Sorry, pardon me. The planning application in front of the committee today is at a well-known location, an important asset for the park, for Wales and for the UK. Furthermore, it's in a very sensitive area, especially in landscape terms. Fortunately, it's also a very busy area where the emergency services need to be able to communicate with each other. It takes the form of a very simple pole and antennas and its associated ground-based apparatus. It will provide a 4G radio signal for the emergency services, the police, the ambulance service, the fire service, and will also be available to the mountain rescue teams. The Emergency Services' current communications network is provided by Airwave, and this is a voice-only network which is now outdated. The new technological landscape we live, that network will be turned off soon. The Home Office needs the Emergency Services to move to a data-based network, which would then allow a step change in both communications and working practices, as every vehicle and device becomes, in effect, a mobile office or control room. The Case Officer's report is noted and is comprehensive in its dealing with the application, and so in terms of planning policy assessment, there's nothing I can say that's not already covered in the report in front of you. I would, however, like to stress that the design and appearance of the proposed apparatus has been taken forward in discussion with the park, who also have an interest in the land, to make sure that the visual impacts are minimised and that the operation of the land as a car park and a visitor centre is not prejudiced by the development. In effect, and as seen in the previous slides, the mast will look like a taller telegraph pole or power pole. It is located either in or adjacent to existing development, and its specific location on the summit of Penny Pass allows coverage on both sides of the summit along the A4086. Other physical locations wouldn't allow this extent of coverage. As you will have also read in the background papers, there are studies on the landscape and visual impacts, as well as ecological studies. The landscape study demonstrates that proposed development can be accommodated with only minor impacts, moderate at worst, and these being only in localised views. As the application site lies out with the nearby designated environmental land, there will be no impacts on those important ecological assets. The ability of the emergency services to communicate with each other anywhere is of vital importance. In this case, it is arguably more so due to the incidents which happen in and around the very easily accessible mountain environment of Snowdon. The public benefit of this is hopefully non-controversial and easily understood. It is therefore hoped that the committee members agree that any impacts which have been identified are more than balanced by the benefits of the emergency services and by extension the communities that they serve benefiting from the proposal. It can hopefully allow the application to be approved today. Thank you very much.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi.
Thank you very much. Richard, would you like to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As I say, we have been in discussions with the applicants as late as Monday this week, and if you notice, there were on the plans there are two facilities sheds proposed alongside the pig track. We've been able to reduce that down to one now, so the impact on people walking past up the pig track will be reduced. So that is just the one which is closest to our car park. Those equipment buildings will be stone faced to match the stone on the our building and on the YHA opposite. There are some changes also to the conditions which are in your agenda. Condition number 5, which was a pre-commencement. The applicants have asked for a pre-operational condition in its place, which I've been able to rewrite, and the first two bullet points that are suggested underneath the condition 5, those can be standalone conditions, that the colour of the mast is bitter chocolate, and details of the enclosure, the apparatus building, which is actually duplicated in condition 6. I can either delete that or have it as a standalone condition, which means that the landscape mitigation plan can then be submitted prior to the operation or the facilities being brought into operation. Pre-commencement conditions are helpful, but are not always advisable. So I'm quite happy to reduce that to a pre-operational condition rather pre-commencement. So we have revised plans, which means that, but I haven't seen them yet. Means that the recommendation, I'd like your authority to determine the application subject to these changes to the condition and submission of suitable plans which will reduce the number of the equipment and facilities building down to one from two. Otherwise, all the other conditions are as in the report. So it's a change of recommendation, Chairman, to want to delegate to officers to determine the application on these conditions, subject to those changes which I've just mentioned.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr iawn, Richard. Sorry.
Just to be clear, Chair, the plan on page 17 of your pack, that is the one that will change. That shows where the buildings are. And if you're happy to allow or to permit after the meeting today, would you allow me as a director to delegate that power to me? So to delegate the decision to me afterwards. Thank you. You've heard the recommendation. Any proposals to approve? Louise has her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Recommend that we approve this application. Sticking my head in the parapet. Thank you.
Rwy'n yn eilio?
A June yn eilio.
A June, okay, diolch yn fawr.
June is seconding. Does anybody want to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to speak there.
Brian.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd like to recognise the work that the officers and the applicant have put into trying to get the best solution here. And clearly, emergency service provision in that area is essential. I just got two questions. One is I'm concerned about switch from pre-commencement to pre-operational for clarification on the detail there, and be interested to know a little bit more why that change is in there. But to me, it would be better that we understood exactly before things started moving on to site. The second one, which is perhaps bigger, in the current technological age, I would be interested to know whether there's been any consideration to linking the 4G network into something else just for that site. So it bounces off the 4G onto satellite or onto microwave systems that might be able to do that. I'm no technician, but I do know that some of these things can be done. And I'd be interested to know whether that has been considered, because some of those technologies would actually have a smaller impact on that side.
Coming back to you on the pre-commencement, if we look at condition 5, which is the one it concerns, the mass to be finished in bitter chocolate, that is actually on the plans as well. So it's double counted in effect. I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a throat this morning. But just to be absolutely sure about that we are going to get that colour, I can have that as, or we can reproduce that as a standalone condition that it shall be bitter chocolate. And the second bullet point, it is duplicated in condition 6, but again, just to re-emphasize, it can be a standalone. All the other bullet points are to do with restoration and how it's going to look after the facility, the mast is there. So in effect, we don't necessarily need to know those details prior to determination, but it will be something that we do require at a later stage. So if those first 2 bullet points were not there, I think I would have put it down as a pre-operational condition anyway. But obviously we had to make sure that it was going to be the right colour and the right materials. As the request came in from the applicants because they are looking to get on site as soon as possible and do not want to go through the process of having to submit, because it has to be through a formal submission to the authority, this was a condition that was requested by NRW, but obviously we've agreed to it. We would have to consult with them, which may take a month or 2 months to secure agreement. But if it's a pre-commencement, then we have time to consider the details properly and in detail and give a valid judgment on those and decision. I mean, it's one of those where if those first 2 bullet points were not there, it would have been a pre-operational rather than a pre-commencement condition, because they can't do anything until that condition is reached. They can't do anything on site until that.
That would be my preferred position, Chair.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Rwy'n arall?
Anyone else? Thank you.
To the second point that I raised, which was to do with consideration of other technologies that might have had lesser of an impact.
Yeah, I mean, this mast, emergency services mast here, we've been in discussion with the applicants for probably 3 or 4 years, and we've been going around all sorts of alternatives, and the dish was considered. But now, I'm no technician on these, but as I understand it, using a dish, there is a delay on going to the dish, going to the satellite, and then back down to the ambulance or the police or whoever. So that was ruled out as a possibility. That's as far as I know. And
But the answer is it has been considered, and
they have every other even across the road, further up, as a rock, as a further over here, there, everywhere, every aspect has been, and this is the best we've come up with.
Can I just for the moment, Brian,
Can I just come in there, please, Chair? Could you explain your favoured position on the condition? I didn't quite understand what you favoured, and is that an improvement to the actual proposal?
that I don't know because it's in technical language, but I would prefer us to have agreed what the finishes are before equipment gets on site, which to my mind is pre-commencement rather than pre-operational.
I can answer that. I can answer that. I mean, the colour has already been agreed.
Yeah.
But to reinforce it as a condition, the materials have been agreed, but enforce it with a condition. So those first two bullet points have been agreed and they're on the plan.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Oes 'na rywun arall?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Me, please,
Louise
Chair.
has her hand up as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louise.
I had to lower my hand, but I do want to make a few comments.
Okay.
Anyone that knows me knows I'm a bit of a purist and I don't like change and all the rest of it. I hate wind turbines. I can't stand acres and acres of solar panels. But this one's a no-brainer. You know, that is a very, very busy car park all year round. And if it's for the emergency services only, then we've got to do it. I mean, it's a bit like house insurance. You don't want to pay it, and until you need it, do you? So I hope that the rest of the panel will support this. There will probably be a few comments from the public, but if it saves lives, then it's a no-brainer. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Louise. Oes 'na rywun arall yn siarad?
Okay, thanks, Louise. Anyone else want to speak? Elfed, then Edgar, please. I just have a quick question. You've said that you've checked every alternative. There are two pylons in this site. Have you thought about integrating both together? Is it possible to do that with the technology available to us today? There will be 3 masts there now. Why not use one of the poles that are already in situ?
I'm not sure that they would be able to. Well, I'm not going to try and answer that. I don't know is the answer.
Because in the actual photos shown, it shows that there are already the ugly electricity poles there. The policy requires that the best options are presented and the officers try to negotiate to get the best option. And as a committee, we have to deal with what's in front of us. And we're hoping that this is the one with the least effect. We have to accept what's in front of us and decide on that basis. Edgar?
Sorry, I just wanted to add that I did put quite a number of notices around the car park and by the youth hostel. We had no responses to the notices, so all the people, if they do read planning notices, we never know about these things, but nothing came back in objecting to this proposal from people who did read it and have an opinion.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Edgar.
Okay, thank you, Edgar. I was just going to second Louise's proposal. It's already been seconded by June. But the head of planning knows what we've discussed this morning, and they won't be able to start before they've brought all the details back to us and they get the permission. Is that right? So I don't know what the issue is with that. Anyone else? Tim also has his hand up in the room. Tim? Thank you, Chair. Following up from what Elfed said, the 2 other poles are there, and we're getting one additional one. And I totally understand what John is saying, that we have to deal with what's in front of us today. But is there no possibility of using this or of a way of funding this, using the poles and those being put underground as well? That plan, can we use that? We use it to underground it, and I'm totally supportive of what you're saying, and this may be outside of our remit as such, but there should be some form of effort to reduce the effect on the horizon, really, and underground these. Obviously, that's something that's different to what's in front of us today, but for information, there is a fund of money with Spend Scottish Power for undergrounding pylons. That is on the list as it happens. It has been for a long time. There are barriers as to why it's not being undergrounded. There are environmental issues. They're looking into it. It's on their list as a potential undergrounding, but that's a completely separate project. So I'm supportive of what's being proposed. Anyone else? If not, we'll go to the vote, please. The proposal is by Louise and June has seconded that we go along with the recommendation and permit this application. Show of hands, please. Carried. Approved. Thank you. Just want to bring in Councillor Joe Nuttall back into the room, please. Okay, thank you. Land near Teraidion, Sychnant, Conwy. It's a retrospective planning application for the erection of a building for mixed use agriculture and keeping horses as well. Alice, I hope you can hear me. Yes, we can. Thank you. So this is a retrospective application for the mixed use of agriculture and keeping horses. The site is located in the open countryside in Henry. The building is located in an open field, which is the boundary is hedges by Bwlch Sychnant. The building is set back from the road, and you get access from it from the east along Bwlch Sychnant. The building measures 9.7 meters, as you can see in the plans there. It's been designed to be open up on the front, providing shelter for the animals. The centre and back are enclosed for storing hay, tech and equipment. And there's a loft each end as well, including ladders for further storage. The work of building this has not been completed as yet. These are recent photos of the building. You can see the materials as well, and the photo on the top right shows the building that was previously on site. So it is considered that the building complies with the requirements of Development Policy 1 in the fact that the nature, location, siting, height, form and scale of the development is sympathetic to the character of the site and its locality in the open countryside. The materials are sympathetic to the surrounding of the site and conform therefore with Development Policy 6. And the strategic policy C, the spatial policy, agricultural development is acceptable in the countryside as long as it's sympathetically included in the landscape. There is no mention of keeping horses, but it is a news that you would expect to see in open countryside. Once again, on the condition that it is sympathetic to the landscape, and this has already been discussed. There's a condition that has been included to limit the use of the building to these uses. And we have looked at external lighting, etc. And the recommendation is to approve subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you very much, Alice. Do we have a proposal? No, actually, we have a speaker first. Tanya McCormack, you have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Tanya McCormack. I'm the applicant. So thanks for inviting me here. I'm from Llanfihangel. I bought this parcel of land in 2018. I'm currently living in Ripon, but we're moving to Llysfine in January. The application is for a mixed-use agriculture and equestrian barn, which replaces the barn that was on the land before, which was destroyed in 2021 in Storm Arwen. So it's a high wind area. So I've gone for something solid and apex roof, resist the wind. The barn's at the bottom of the hill. There are lots of trees all around, and at no point is it on the skyline. It is on the same site as the previous barn. It's bounded by trees to the west, which run the whole length of the property, and to the south there's a hedge that runs down Succulent Pass Road. So we're proposing to plant, do some tree planting on the south, add some height, which will be mainly silver birch, but also probably willow and other fast-growing species. And then on the north, to the north, we put a raised mound of earth, which stretches about 6 meters and it's about 1 meter high. That's like to help deflect the wind and also to put a bit of a visual barrier. So planting with silver birch on that, and that just echoes the silver birch. And we mount above the barn. There's the orchard is here. The barn's down here. There's a fence line, goes like that. This is the road. We planted a hedge that was in 2020 or 2019 before the work started. Before the last barn, there's a hedge here, mixed native hedge, and along here it's hazel and elder and crabapple. So what I can do is I can let them just grow up to about 4 foot, and that'll shield it from view from, above the barn. The access to the field is at the top of the hill. There's a pull-in off the road, so it's I guess you're familiar with Succulent Pass Road. It's a 40-mile-an-hour single-track road. So we're going to keep this historic access. You can pull in off the road before you stop. There's room there for a car and a trailer before you need to stop to open the gate. The barn is a traditional timber frame structure. It's made with locally grown and milled larch with oak pegs.
Yes.
Can I add one thing? Sorry, even though it says it's mixed use equestrian and agriculture, so I've got my breathing ewes. We don't ride in the field, so there's no jumps. Okay.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Oes 'na ryw-
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody want to propose the recommendation, which is to permit? Some people have their hands up. Edgar, are you proposing? I am proposing the recommendation. And June has seconded that as well. Joe has her hand up as well, Chair. Joe.
Yeah, I was happy to support as well. Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else want to speak in relation to this application? Brian also has his hand up.
Trying to get clarification in my mind, Chair, whether this is being applied for as effectively a general purpose building or whether it's being applied for as an agricultural building, because as I understand our policy and was said, that buildings for agriculture in open countryside would be permitted, where my understanding also is that horses are not usually considered agriculture. So I've got a little bit of concern about the interpretation of how we're handling this and would like some clarification on that, please.
Yeah, so just i gadarnhau, nath y
So
cais...
just to confirm, the application was submitted initially as agricultural use only, but having looked at the plans and the information that we got with the application, it became apparent that there was quite a bit of use relating to keeping horses, and that doesn't normally come under agricultural use. And so we had to add to the description of the application to agricultural and horse keeping. I think I touched upon this fact during the presentation that there are no specific policies for keeping horses, but it is the use that you would expect to see in this location. And yet again, it comes down to the effect that it's likely to have on the location and the environment as assessed in the report, really. We didn't think that that use is detrimental to the site, and it's something that would be supported, although the specific policies are not there specifically relating to horse keeping. Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll take it to the vote. The proposal is that we permit. Edgar proposed, June seconded. Show of hands, please. I can. Elwyn is saying that he can only see Alice on the screen. Motion carried, and 11 people have voted. Thank you for that. So that application has been permitted. Item number 4.3, land at Tŷ Newydd, Rhydymain. David Thomas is noted here, but David isn't here. He's on holiday, and so Richard will be taking this application today. Thank you.
Yes, me again. Before we go into any discussion or presentation, I did get an email from the applicants yesterday requesting that the application be deferred until they requested it be deferred, and I'll read what they said. Can we please defer the application from committee tomorrow? We are trying to understand the art of the possible in terms of height drop to minimize impact while delivering a useful service. There is potential to significantly lower the height, but we need to check the technical details, do additional surveys to confirm. Now that came in yesterday at 20 to 3, now in the afternoon. Now, as officers, if they are prepared to look at a significant lowering of the mast, then we have no objection as officers to a deferment. It's obviously your decision as members whether you want to defer it or determine it today. We haven't seen any details. I've got no further details to show you. But I did respond to them and say, yes, I will raise this with members, that we will put it on the next committee on January 24th. As it stands, if we do not get a significant reduction in height within time, and I mean, we would have to reconsult with our consultees. We will have to see plans. They will have to redo their landscape visual impact assessments, and all the technical details will have to be amended as well, all their photo montages, so that we've got something to present to you in January. I made that very clear to them that we would not be able to defer it for any longer than that, and it would go before you in January. as it stands or as amended with a significant, and it has to be a significant drop. There is a question as to whether a significant drop would mean it would be a new application, but until we see any details, we can't make that decision. It's, again, it's very disappointing that applicants come in quite so late once the committee report is there for them to see and realisation. You know, we've been talking to these people for 12 months now, and this is an option that they could come up with. So the decision is yours whether we defer it to see what they can come up with for the January committee, or whether we consider it as a new application. I've given them the opportunity to withdraw if they can't get the stuff to us by, well, we need it by the end of next week, effectively, so that we can consult and get something back from landscape officers at Natural Resources Wales, and for us to consider it as well, in consideration of the Christmas break as well. So that's the situation we are. So the first, I will do the presentation. I think we did have a speaker, but they've chosen not to attend. So if you'd like me to go through the presentation, I will do.
Richard,
yes, sorry.
I don't think there's any point in you going through the presentation at the moment, is there?
Well, that's the first decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah, penderfyniad cynta di os da chi isio oedi'r cais.
The initial decision to be made, really, if you want to defer the application. So we can decide if it's a new application, so it's totally up to you as a committee. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody propose? Anwen has proposed that we defer it for a month. Do we have a seconder? Can we please have a show of hands that we defer this application? Motion carried. On to the next application, which is 4.4. Tal Treiddyn Fawr, Dyffryn Ardudwy. Aled Lloyd. Thank you, Chair. I can just share the presentation. Yes, this is an application to convert, extend and change of use outbuildings to create 4 new open market dwellings, as well as formation of new access lane, new boundary walls, and the associated landscaping as well. The building is a Grade 2 listed building. The site is to the south of Llanbedr village, outside Dyffryn Ardudwy. Next, please. The plan here shows you the highway approaching the site from the A496 highway. The photos show you the access from the highway. The site is just nearby the house that you can see in the background there. These are the buildings taken as aerial photography. These were taken quite a long time ago, and the buildings have become even more dilapidated since these were taken. The house in the background have roof lights up there, and that is a separate building owned by somebody else, and that's a Grade 2 listed building, 2 stars as well. This is a development, and it includes 3 external outbuildings. It shows the condition they're in now and the proposed development. There has been quite a lot of discussion on this since this was submitted in November 2021, over 2 years ago now, in order to get the plans right and acceptable so that they actually conserve the listed buildings. Next, you can see the small amendments to the roof lights there. Next, looking up from the fields. Just a correction. I had noted that there were 2 beds in the units, but as you can see at the bottom there, the actual number of beds are noted here. North 2, East 3, West 3, South 1. That's an actual correction to what was noted in your report. These are good examples of agricultural buildings, and the conversion and proposed use and design actually retains their characters. And in line with strategic policy F. As you will be aware, development policy 9 requires for any proposal outside of the building line has to be affordable, short-term self-catering, or as a part of a rural enterprise scheme, or an open market dwelling with the payment of a commuted sum as agreed by the applicant. In this case, originally the applicant did agree to pay the commuted sum in accordance with this policy because the development creates 4 new open market dwellings. The application was assessed on that, and Cadw did have some concerns, and they required more amendment to the actual plans so that they conserve these important buildings. Following on from that, an agricultural officer was appointed in order to deal with this application because there was additional cost involved. And the requirements from Cadw, we invited the applicant to look at the additional cost involved in dealing with the listed buildings in order to conserve these buildings as required by them. Following on from this, the officers thoroughly assessed this element of the proposal and decided not to ask for the commuted sum payment in this case. Obviously, this decision was not taken lightly, but the applicant had submitted detailed costs, and this was an important element to be considered in this case for not asking for the commuted sum. As you can see from the buildings, Baltreidin are a brilliant example of stone-built traditional agricultural buildings, and because of that, as the plans demonstrate, the intention is that they will be conserved and preserved in an acceptable way. And because of this, we believe that there is sufficient justification for not paying the commuted sum in this case. As you can see from this, there has been an objection to this from the Community Council in the Ffrindardydwy Telebons, and we understand this as officers. But as a result of the detailed plans that have been submitted of how to conserve them and preserve them as traditional buildings in the area, officers that there are reasons for justifying not paying the commuted sum in this case. So the design
the schemes therefore preserve these buildings for the future, and so taking the development in its totality, we believe that it's an appropriate way of renovating traditional stone agricultural buildings that will be preserved we understand the objection by the Ardudwy Talabont Community Council, but the applicant has assessed the situation, has presented adequate information to justify not asking for the commuted sum in this instance. So the recommendation following on from this is to permit with conditions. There is one change to condition 17. The applicants have presented the information to the Archaeological Society of North Wales, and if this is permitted, this condition will not be required, but we will be asking for photographic evidence for the future. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Aled. So there is Mr. Madder. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I think Aled's report is quite good and complete, and there's not much for me to add. I just thought I'd say I am the architect and also the owner of these buildings. I first saw these buildings about 4 years ago, thought they were very beautiful and that I could rescue them from collapse as a last project before retiring. They'd been unused for decades and on the market for years when I saw them. I've done a similar project in Arthog, which I completed about 10 years ago. I purchased a range of collapsing listed agricultural buildings there, designed a scheme, funded got planning permission, detailed listed building consent, funded a scheme and sold them. There are now 7 homes there. And for me and the community in Arthog, it's a big plus. And personally, I'm very happy that I played a part in that. As I did at Arthog, I approached council before I purchased these units with a detailed scheme, including all the key details through 2 formal pre-apps. I agreed these details and the scheme with Arwell Thomas and with Aled Lloyd in writing. When I had that agreed, I proceeded to purchase, not before. I will focus on the commuted sum payment, as that is the issue that has brought this in front of the committee. All the other things seem to be covered. One of the key points in the pre-app was the commuted sum payments, because it was always very, very tight financially. Arwell agreed in writing that because of the community benefit to saving these buildings, if the cost of restoring them and converting them was too high, these sums would be waived. Aled has outlined what happened in his report to you, and eventually a full feasibility study was requested by the council. We employed a firm of Quantity Surveyors to do that, and it was accepted by the council, and the commuted sum payment was waived. I know these payments are very important to the community, but in this case, the cost of carrying out the works is high, and there's a substantial deficit. It cannot possibly support these payments. I'm very grateful to the council for waiving them. If we had received a simple planning consent as agreed at pre-app stage and received it quickly, the project would be finished by now. We're still sorting it out. And because of this, we've had Brexit and COVID, and these have brought very substantial increases in construction costs. So while it's been delayed, in addition to inflation, we have suffered from the turnover of conservation architects within the council, each one of them adding substantially to the costs. They have largely ignored the initial pre-app agreement, and that has been very expensive for me, detrimental to the project. Obtaining this planning consent, obtaining this planning consent with the commuted sum payments waived is a substantial step forward in saving these buildings. I very much hope the committee will approve our application today, and these wonderful buildings will finally be on the road to being saved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any proposals at all?
Yes, I propose that we approve, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Rwy'n
Thank
eilio?
you. Does anybody second that? Can I talk, please? If we could take someone to second, first of all. John has his hand up. Is that a seconder? John seconds the proposal. Okay. Someone wants to talk. Could I say something? Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I say that I'm disappointed, and I'm talking on behalf of the majority of the Ardudwy residents as a local representative. We're disappointed that the park and the officers have reached this decision to recommend that the applicant does not have to commute the appropriate amount because it's too high, and not section 106 either. I know of local young families who have had to pay this amount to not put section 106s on their properties, and they're in the same situation with higher costs as well. And the feeling locally is that the officers have come to this solution which opens the floodgates for others in the future and applicants in the future when they do this kind of application to request a similar process. And I don't know how the authority will be in a position to reject once they permit this today. How will they reject further applications of similar nature? I'm not sure if I'm in the right place, but I object the recommendation, and I would like the application to be rejected until the applicant has agreed to put a 106 on the application or to pay the appropriate amount as everybody else in the area have to. If I can come in here, there is a proposal that is made and seconded for permitting. What Anwen is proposing can't be considered unless the original proposal goes to vote. If that fails, then we can take your proposal, but the original proposal needs to go to vote first of all. Just explaining the process. Thank you, Iwan. It's on Anwen's point. This decision, if it goes in favour of the applicant, won't open the floodgate to other applications being dealt with differently. This is an exception, as Aled has explained, and it's not a small decision not to accept the payment. The applicant has presented detailed figures in respect of the financial aspects of this application. A report has been prepared specifically for this, and the status, the registered status of the buildings has been an important factor for the high costs of this business. So this is quite a unique application, and I don't remember not receiving the commuted figure previously, and it's unexpected in the future also. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Chair, please.
Just question, Eglur.
Could I just ask a question of clarification? They've talked about a 106 agreement here. What are the implications of the 106, please? So, as 106, we need the commuted amount to ensure that that it's part of the same package, or that it's affordable housing. There are certain elements of the development would have to be affordable housing otherwise. Anybody else want to contribute?
Could I just make a couple of comments?
Yep.
Louise Gynta, wedyn Brian, okay?
Louise and then Brian.
Thank you. I do sympathise with what Anwen's saying, but You know, how many hundreds, if not thousands, of buildings are there in the national park that we drive past on a daily basis? And they're just in a state of such dilapidation, and it's so sad to see them just rotting into the ground. There's a lot of work gone into this report. The buildings will be preserved, and they'll be preserved sensitively, and they'll also be providing homes. And that's what we want. You know, we are the national park. We can't set everything in aspic and preserve it how it was, because sadly, because I'm a bit of a history buff, you know, we can't go backwards in time. So that's why I think we should go with this. It is a unique one. So I'm definitely in favour of this. I'd rather see something like this than brand new, horrible cardboard box houses popping up everywhere. So, yeah, let's hope that the rest of the committee feel the same as me. I 100% support this. Thanks, Chair.
Brian has his hand up over here. Brian.
I welcome the clarification to Chair, and that is in relation to, if we were going down the 106 route, that money would be used for affordable housing. That's correct, isn't it?
Okay.
My question relates to the fact that these are open market properties. And we've also discussed in other contexts the question of second homes and too many tourist properties, and we're wanting residential properties. Some of these properties are quite small. Do we know there is a market for one-bedroom properties on the open market? And second, if we do, or even if that's not a consideration, is there any that can be done to avoid increasing second homes, holiday homes, rather than for residential purposes, without needing to put a 106 on? Because I do understand it would be better to have the buildings preserved rather than not preserved, because having seen the pictures, they're clearly a group of buildings that we need to see restored.
Yeah, we could condition.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Sorry, arall.
Aled yn atab.
Mi esan ni dweud amod I gyfyngu.
We could put a restriction to the use. It's possible to do that. Does anybody else want to contribute? Can I just come back on Brian's point? It is possible to put a planning condition. Since 2022, you will know this because of discussions in relation to Article 4 of the use for residential, but you have C3, which is permanent whole year properties. Then you have holiday homes and short-term holiday lets, and it's possible to move between those uses, you will know, without planning permission. And it's possible for us to put a planning condition restricting this to C3 only. But the applicant would have to put a planning permission in then to change that to C5 or C6. It is possible to control that. I'm not sure what the intention of the applicant is in this respect, and I don't know if he would accept that. But if we decided to do that as a committee today, it's possible, and the applicant could then apply to change that. That's not a part of the recommendation of the officers today. He's flexible to move between those three classes at the moment, but it is possible for us to restrict it to either C3, C5 or C6, but I'm assuming that C3 would be the one that you would choose if you make the decision. Okay, thank you.
That if we approve the application, that we then take a vote on whether we should put that.
Well, Brian yn ofyn ydi...
What Brian is asking, if we could offer that as an amendment. and that we restrict to C3 if somebody could put that proposal before the committee, and if that is seconded, we could accept that as an amendment which would go for vote before, and if that fails, then we would go to the original proposal to apply, to permit in accordance with what the officers have indicated.
Could I propose that's an amendment then, please, Chair?
There is a proposal by Brian. C3? So there's a proposal for an amendment, and I'm looking for a seconder to that. There are 2 seconders. So to restrict the use to C3. Edgar. This question I want to ask could impact on the decision you've made now, and that's why I wanted to come in. Where is it as far as the location of building? Is it within the boundaries or outside the boundaries? 3/4 of a mile from Llanbedr. And about a mile from Dyffryn Tydwyn. So the site, I think that should be considered as well, that it is outside of the park policy. Thank you. Elfed has his hand up as well, Alan. Can I just, on Edgar's point, just to make clear, changing buildings outside of the boundary is acceptable within the policy. The part that doesn't quite go with the policies is the exclusion of the payment. I love seeing these buildings being renovated and preserved in a good condition, but we can't turn our backs on the local young community and the young people who need properties by not taking the payments that everybody else has to pay. We're turning our backs on our young people and their opportunity to have affordable housing. And if this project proceeds, I'm sure they have the funding. Everybody has to do their sums before any plan. I'm, on the one hand, very pleased that they're preserved, but also I feel that we're turning our backs on our young people without charging and providing these conditions and reducing the possibility for young Welsh people to have their own properties. We're putting less in the pot to have their own affordable housing by doing so. So I'm not sure what to do. Thank you. Just to be clear, the applicant did propose to pay the payments originally when the application was made, but it's only after this application has been exceptionally complicated. It's taken much too long. It's been very frustrating to the applicant and the officers. There's a lot of negotiations with Cadw, with the officers, and the costs have increased significantly as the preservation costs have increased. So that's why the conclusion was reached and that it wouldn't be possible. So just to be clear, he did go in with the intention of paying, but it's only after the negotiations that we reached the conclusion that it wouldn't be possible. It was the additional requirements by Cadw really that forced this. Does Elwyn want to talk? Is it Elwyn or Elwyn? I would like these buildings being renovated, of course. And I do understand, but my concern with it as well, because of what Cadw will be asking and everything else. I'll ask the question. Are they going to be within the reach of local people. I know it's not a consideration for planning, but I do have concerns that there is nothing that comes to the local community out of it. And it's a very difficult one to make a decision on. On the one hand, I do want it developed. Of course I do. I don't know if there is anything that can alleviate our concerns. Thank you. Thank you. I'll come in myself, if I may now. We've seen this a number of times at Cyngor Gwynedd also, and it is of concern to me and to every council across Wales. At the moment, we're trying to get the government to change legislation so that these people can't avoid paying. Carmarthenshire, for instance, housing developers are doing their very best to avoid legally binding payments to benefit the local communities. The council planning committee said, I find it difficult to think of any other sector where companies are afforded protection for their profit margins. That is, making profit is the intention and nothing else, and it is of concern also that there are local people who phoned me wanting this affordable housing, and I've been not wanting it, and I've been saying it's a policy, but now what concerns me is that the officers are deciding not to follow this. The Welsh language is not talked about. It's on its knees in that area. Young people can't get any houses, and there is no talk about affordable houses. Why won't you put affordable houses there and forget the commutation figure? It's concerning, and we're not getting anywhere better by allowing these. What happens is that buildings are put before people, our young people, and the Welsh language in particular. There is no mention of the Welsh language at all. Everyone knows that the local people can't buy them. They will cost £500,000 and more after spending all of this money on them. And it is worrying that people are thinking of supporting this application. And then in the county council, they would. It's similar. Does anybody else want to contribute? Could I come back on that point, please? Just to make it very clear as to where we stand with the policy, so that everyone is clear about changing. We can offer affordable housing on site, or you can offer open market with the commuting figure. Changing properties in rural areas is quite difficult up to the affordable housing standards. The location isn't perfect either for that. And the most important point in this respect is that the renovation costs, especially with registered properties, I think it would be commercially difficult, if not impossible, to offer affordable housing. That's why the policy offers the commuted figure. And I know that it doesn't accord with this, but it's the viability of the site also that is a consideration. It's an important planning importance. And if the site isn't viable, the site won't be built on at all. And that's why it is an exception. It is a unique situation. I don't remember when we didn't accept this figure before, so it doesn't set any precedent at all. But we've received the figures and we've accepted them in their entirety. I don't know if it's an option for you as a committee, but if you would want to delay and if we can present some figures and get an independent figure by the next meeting, I don't know. That is possibly an option if there are grave concerns about this. Thank you. Does anybody else want to contribute? Edgar has his hand up. I have a question, Chair. If Cadw have created this additional funding or have asked, why doesn't Cadw give them a grant? Are they giving a grant? No. No, there isn't a grant. No. Does anybody else want to ask anything? Jonathan has made a proposal there that we get an independent report of these costs. What does the committee feel about that? There is a proposal and an amendment. I think the proposal to adjourn, I don't think we could offer that as an amendment, so it has to go to vote. First of all, about the amendment that is proposed by Brian and seconded. And then the amendment is that we propose that we allow or permit, but that we restrict the use of the units in their entirety to C3. Can you explain the intention of C3? I'll pass over. John, there are 3 categories of views. Since 2022, C3 is permanent residential use where people, so that's their main residence throughout the year. And 5 is a second home, and then C6 is holiday, short-term holiday lets. So those are the 3 categories. It would be possible, and some authorities already do this. We haven't done so here, have we? We could put a restriction to the use of the building to C3 only. Okay, thank you. So that's the amendments proposed.
You'll be voting now. Oh, yeah, so yeah.
Iawn. Ar y gwestiwn felly, ie?
So we're voting on the improvements then, that we permit and include C3 in accordance with the recommendation, but that we limit the use of the units to the C3 use. Can I ask a question, please? We're now on the vote. It was a question relating to the vote. If it's a technical point, yes. If we're voting in favor of including C3, does that then mean that we've voted in favor of the recommendation? Yes, it does. It means that you've permitted, but that you limit you add the limitation of C3, that the use is C3 only. Okay, we'll put it to the vote then. Everybody in favor of permitting with C3?
Now.
Now, so rwy'n yn erbyn?
9 in favor. Anyone against? 3. 4. Motion carried 9-4. It's about time for us to get this Article 4 in place. Okay, thank you.
Reit, awn ni mlaen wan i 4.5.
On to item 4.5, land at Blaen Cefn, Penrhyn Deudraeth. Aled Lloyd once again. I'm just starting the presentation, if I may. This is an application to change the use of the land in order to create a temporary off-site living accommodation facility up until December 2025. Alterations to the existing vehicular access off the A487 associated with the Eryri Visual Impact Provision VIP project and creation of a temporary internal access road together and the associated works as well. You're all aware of the site. You've driven past it several times, I'm sure. It's opposite the A470, just outside of the village of Penrhyn Deudraeth, and just about within the boundary of the national park. The yellow line there is the national park boundary. This shows you the site and the road that's being created. It's not an intention to use the current site, but there is another access and that will need to be adapted. There's an internal road that will lead to the existing site, the caravan and camping site that exists there already. This is the road looking in from either side. For information for the members, we had an appeal on this site in 2015 as the part of an application to extend the use of in, and that appeal was refused because of the effect on the landscape of the national park, but I'll elaborate on that in the presentation. The site is well screened from the highway. This was taken a few days ago, although the leaves have actually fallen. It's still quite hidden from the road there, as you can see. This is how it looks on the other side of the valley. You can see the cowshed there. The road will access beside there, and it will be used only for the temporary site. There is a lake on site, and the new road will go past the lake. We wanted to keep the road there. They wanted it to be there full time, but the officers were averse to that. This is the current access of the A470. This access will have to be widened in accordance with highways requirements, but it is a current access and existing access that you can see there. And the trunk roads don't have any objections for them to use this access. This is looking towards Penrhyn Deudraeth from the access as well. These are the photographs showing the temporary road to the site. So this is the location plan. There will be buildings for the workers on site too, and other associated buildings in association with the actual use. In 2021, permission was granted for the VIP Eryri project, and the work has started on this. It meant creating a new tunnel between Kilfor, nearby Talsarna, towards the quarry in Minffordd Garth, and this included the removal of 10 existing pylons, and there will be a significant improvement to the landscape. Obviously, this is major work, and the purpose of this application is to provide accommodation for the workers who will be undertaking the tunneling work. They are professional people in this type of work, and there will be a lot of local people who will also be employed in relation to the project. Next. Obviously, a proposal like this, 100 units and the associated works is against every policy in the local development plan, but we also have to consider that this is a temporary development and the improvements that will happen as a result of this visual improvement plan project, and it's a temporary provision of accommodation for the workers, and hopefully they will leave the site December 2025. So they're these small cabins. Because of their nature, they couldn't be considered in any sort of a permanent provision at all. They are for the workers, and there will also be units where they will be able to eat, and the associated parking spaces as well. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, a new road will be built from the access of the A470. Originally, the plan showed that they wanted the road to be permanent, but officers as well as the town council in Penryn had concerned that this could lead to a permanent development on the site. So we made it clear to the agents that the road would have to be temporary, and there is a condition if you do decide to grant permission to that end in the list of conditions. So at the end of this current use in December of 2025, everything will be removed from the site and it will regenerate itself naturally so that it looks more or less as it looks today. The agents did present information because we'd asked for information as to whether or not they'd looked at other sites. Obviously, they can't go away too far from the current site because it wouldn't be operationally viable. They looked at 5 kilometers in the vicinity of the site in Kilmore and Minffordd, but there were problems with those sites. They have looked at the site in Porthmadog as well, and there were limitations in relation to flooding there, so they couldn't use it. So they've undertaken quite a detailed research really in relation to looking for other places before they actually decided on this site. Obviously, there are houses nearby the development, pretty close really, within 200 meters. And comments have been made by Gwynedd Council relating to concerns relating to those the dwellings close by. So they have mentioned noise pollution and have asked for conditions in relation to that. As you can see in the plan, Tyn Ffridd is one of the closest houses to this development. As I said, there will be conditions in place, and the agent has also declared that there will be a statement so that there's a code of conduct in order to reinforce the respect for neighbours, appropriate behaviour. Also, a statement was submitted as well in relation to transport to the site. There will be 60 workers working on every shift, and the conclusion that the transport assessments came to was that there will be about 8 trips during the shift times, and they'll be using minibuses in order to transport the workers to their work locations in order to reduce the number of vehicular movements. The access has taken quite a bit more to deal with than originally anticipated in relation to drainage, for example. They had intended to put drainage facilities, but NRW and Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water were against this because there is a main sewage pipe nearby the site. So after a lot of discussion, a pipe will be located just outside the industrial site in Penryn in order to connect with the main sewage line or pipe. A Welsh language statement was submitted and an assessment was undertaken. The developer understands the requirements. There may be a temporary effect because there will be workers coming on to a small effect on the Welsh language, but the applicant has committed to raise awareness among the workers about the Welsh language and the Welsh culture in relation to this proposed use. So the conclusion, because it's a temporary application of a permission, there are benefits for Eryri National Park as a result, and the applicant has looked at other sites and considered those and came to the conclusion that the Blaen Ken site is the most suitable site. Ecological assessments, transport assessments, community assessments have also been undertaken, and there will be no long-term effects as a result of permitting this development. Obviously, there are concerns because of the nature of the site and the history of the site. There's quite a lot of complex history to the site. There's been quite a lot of development control issues relating to the site, and this could lead to using the site permanently. There are strong conditions. You can see the list of conditions in the report, but specifically condition 3 limits the use and states that everything has to be removed from site. By 31st of July 2026, there will be nothing at all left by then. And we must state that the agent and the applicant and the National Grid was related to this proposal. They wouldn't want to see that they also want to see the sites being cleared. Hochtief are the company and the company, and they're aware of the requirement. We also have a speaker, Sioned Edwards from Catnant. You have 3 minutes. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to comment on this application. This has been submitted by Hochtief Construction UK, who have appointed as specialist contractors by the National Grid to design and build a tunnel under the Dwyrid estuary in Eryri. The intention of the project is to reduce the visual impact of the grid lines which run across the Dwyrid estuary from Unffordd to Llandegfyn. It would be achieved through removing part of the overhead lines and burying the electric cables in an underground tunnel. The application in front of you today refers to providing accommodation for 100 workers temporarily in order to provide sufficient accommodation without affecting tourist accommodation. Hochtief intends to provide suitable and adequate accommodation for the employees throughout the year without affecting the availability of accommodation for tourists. Extensive research has been carried out before choosing the sites, including Cooks in Penrhyn Deudraeth and a site near Penamser in Porthmadog, which were ruled out because of the flood risk. The workers in the temporary accommodation would be specialists who would live away from home for a period of time to work on the tunnel. They will use the accommodation around their shift. They will be working 1 shift a day, and there will be 3 shifts on the tunnel working a day. The changes and access to the site on foot would be in relation to the public footpath which links the site with Penrhyn Deudraeth. It would be further landscaped, and the trees would also be conserved as a part of the site. Once the use would come to an end, it would be reinstated, and as required by the conditions that Aled has mentioned and in accordance with the agreement with the National Grid. Hochtief has engaged with the local community regarding this proposal, and there are ongoing detailed discussions and extensive discussions with statutory advisors to ensure that the proposal is effective regarding the technical considerations as highlighted in the officer's report. As part of Hochtief's commitment to the Welsh language, they are promoting and raising awareness about Welsh within their workforce, and they have a Welsh language policy. The development will offer support for local businesses, and Hochtief has held a Meet the Buyer event in order to promote opportunities for local businesses as well. The recommendation is to permit, and I hope that you too, as a committee, can support this application today. Thank you very much for that. Does anybody want to make a proposal in relation to the recommendation, which is to permit? Edgar? Anwen, are you seconding? Does anybody want to speak in relation to this application? Tim? And Brian? I'm not sure who had their hand up first. Tim, I believe. I'm in favor of the development, I have to say, and I think that the impact of removing the wires and undergrounding them will be especially beneficial to the park. The only thing I would say from the photos that I've seen there, I saw some invasive species there, and I would like them to make sure that they will be dealing with that accordingly, and that there should be a condition in relation to that in the permission. Anyone else?
I'm supportive of the application as it stands, but I've got some question in relation to after the event. Do we know what's going to happen to these units, which are plastic covered steel with polyurethane? I understand polyurethane is considered to be an environmentally okay product because it can be recycled. But if this is foam that's sprayed onto other materials, is that recyclable? And I don't know, maybe it's too late to do anything about it, but it's a question in the back of my mind that we should have explored what was going to happen to the units afterwards. Are they going to be reused? Are they going to be disposed of?
Chairman, because of the nature of the temporary development, I would suspect that these units are rented in, and then that they would go back to that company who would hire them out. I think that's what usually happens. Yes, the agent has confirmed that. No, they're not. It's up to you as the chair, but I think the chair has a right to ask a question of the speaker. You do have the option within our guidelines. Via the chair, you can ask additional question to the public speaker. The option is there for you if you want to use it. Will that affect the decision?
If it's been reused, I'm happy with it. And I can see the agent nodding.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anybody else want to speak? Joe's hand is up. Joe?
Diolch, Cadeirydd. I know they probably will anyway, but could we condition that the minibus company is a local minibus company to put some money into the area, please? Thank you.
It's not a planning master, of course. We have to limit that. I think that's going to happen already. We can't include that as a condition. From the discussions that I've had with the agent and the company, they are going to be using local services as much as they possibly can. Obviously, they will be spending in Penrhyn Deudraeth Village, and that would be beneficial to the economy, although temporary. Anyone else want to speak? If I may come in there. Tim spoke, and I'm not sure if he actually formally proposed that we permit, but wanted to add a condition in relation to the invasive species. Yep. Japanese knotweed. Edgar has seconded that too. So we do have a proposal that has now been seconded. Does anybody else want to speak? Meryl has her hand up.
Un cwestiwn bach ydi o, efo bo' nhw'n cysylltu
Just ask one more question. In relation to connecting to the main sewer, will they be capping that off after they've left? I believe that will be a requirement that Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water will put in place. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll take it to the vote. Everybody in favour of permitting with the improvements proposed by Tim? Show of hands, please. Motion carried. Anonymous, I believe. Thank you. That's the planning applications dealt with. Item 5, an update on compliance. Jane will be leading on this. Can I just welcome Jane back? She's been away after a period of sickness. It's good to see you back, Jane.
Obviously, the science report is now taking a different format, and it was stipulated that an interim report would be presented to members in December. So I've basically taken this opportunity to trying to put to context really where compliance has been over the last few years, where we are at the current moment in time, where we plan to hopefully go in the future. I'm conscious, obviously, that there's individual cases that we used to have that members may want updates on those. If that's the case and you've got anything specific that you want to raise, I will be remaining after this meeting, and also will be here during lunchtime, that I'll try and help or be able to advise you on who we need to contact, or I'll get relevant officer to contact you. So in terms of that, where we are now, we are fully resourced, and we're a full team of 3, and I'd like to welcome Gavin Roberts. I don't think members have been introduced to, who joined us back in July, and I'm just checking he is online. He did say he was gonna come in for the meeting. So yeah, welcome to Gavin, and say we're a full complement of a full team now. So hopefully we'll be able to make some big changes going forward. Obviously, the report stipulates sort of the current compliance figures that we currently have. We've currently, at the time of writing the report, we had 132 outstanding cases. I'm conscious that I did ask yesterday whether this had changed at all, slight increase, but hopefully we'll be able to sort of get those numbers down as we can go forward in terms of investigations. I've also included in the report the number of notices, retrospective applications that we've had during sort of from April to November time. I've also taken the opportunity to provide members with details in relation to the Welsh Government performance indicators and how these are actually calculated, just so you have an insight in terms of when the full report comes and an understanding of what those are about. Basically, from where we are now in quarters 1 and 2, it's clearly evident that we need to improve our performance. Now that we are a full team of 3, I'm hopeful that we will be able to progress that going forward. And within the report, I've sort of provided indicators of how we propose to do that. You'll note that I've put down in there that we've got specific areas for officers, which when we can concentrate on those areas, save in terms of travelling and so forth, and make it easier for people to know who's dealing with what. We've got APAS system that is going to be updated, hopefully sort of beginning of next year, whereby hopefully that we'll be able to utilise that and make things a bit more streamlined in terms of our processes going forward. So basically, there's a lot of work to do going forward. But I'm hopeful that in June, when we've got the full report, that we'll be able to sort of provide a full sort of insight to exactly what's been going on, and hopefully see an improvement of going forward. But in the meantime, that I just ask members to basically recommend to note this interim report for the time being.
Can I
just make one brief addition? We don't have 3 full-time officers. We have 2.3 officers, but 2.6 full-time equivalent. And we use the surplus of having a part-time officer to buy in private consultants to help with certain cases, just to make it clear. Thank you. Can I also welcome Gavin to us? Would anyone like to make any comments or ask any questions about Jane's report? Tim has his hand up here. Tim, first of all, I'm very pleased to hear that there is a significant number of staff then, and I think it will take the strain away from people who've been doing this for the past few years. But the question is there a plan on paper to reach green? How long? I know things come in and additional things crop up, but do we have steps to come to green? How long is it likely to take? Or is it just hoping for the best?
I'm not quite sure that the translations.
There isn't a specific scheme. Can you hear me? There isn't a specific plan, is there? There are processes. James is working with Alice and Gavin, but there isn't a plan as such. Jane?
Basically, in respect to the plan going forward, obviously we've got Welsh Government performance indicators that we need to improve on, clearly, from seeing those. So the plan is to try and improve on those in the first instance. And by doing that, it'll be a case of updating our processes and procedures, which we've not been able to do probably for the last 3 or 4 years at least. So there's a lot of work to do, but saying now that we are fully resourced, that hopefully we'll be able to sort of progress going forward. And in June, I'll be able to provide details, hopefully, of what we've been doing over this sort of next few months going forward.
All I was asking, Jane, was whether we have a plan. Have we got anything formal to get us to green? Or are we, have we got timescales? Have we got actions we're going to take to get us to green? I know you've got stuff coming in all the while.
There isn't any specific plan. I mean, it really depends on the kind of cases that we're investigating and what crops up at that time. So really, it's sort of very much sort of reactive, that we can't go proactive at the time being, especially at the moment with the number of backlog cases that we've got. I think that we'll be looking at getting those reduced. So dealing with the backlog, and then when we get to some hope in the future, we're about to start looking proactively of doing different things, just to help to cover all sort of compliance and prevent breaches.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, no one else then. The recommendation is to note the content. Is anyone happy to propose? Everyone agreed? Thank you. Great. Number 6. Presenting Article 4. Jonathan? Yes, it was supposed to be the head of policy, Elliw, but my name is on the report, so Elliw may know that she was. So I'm pretty familiar with the content, and I'm happy to share this. As you know, I won't go into detail about the background in the first few paragraphs, sub-legislation in 2020. We have 3 classes. We've already talked C3, C5 and C6. You're allowed to switch from one to another within those because without planning permission, because permitted developments allow that without planning permission, unless there is an Article 4 in place. And if there is an Article 4 direction in place, there will then need to be planning permission to change between C3, C5 and C6, or not. And the Article 4 can restrict which ones you want to restrict and what you want to apply in relation to those classes. Article 4 is something that can be put geographically, so a decision in time can be made to do it across the park or by more local areas. That is something for the future. So that's essentially what Article 4 is. Paragraph 6 demonstrates that further information was given in the working group in October, where there was strong support, and that's why we bring this to you officially, to you as a committee today. I must emphasise, resource-wise, as picked up in paragraph 7, those bullet points demonstrate the work that is required in operating Article 4. There is a lot of work, there's no doubt about that. Preparatory, communication, and then operationally. Through our policies, through increases in applications for planning permissions and enforcement, probably. That is something to be considered, especially in the early years. I think pressure will alleviate after 3 or 4 years. The resource implications. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to have additional staff, so we'll have to work within the capacity currently held. And I'm aware that Cyngor Gwynedd have done this already, and they took advantage of a pilot scheme in Dwyfor, where the government is funding different actions to help the housing situation for local people in that area. And they've taken the opportunity to have officers to operate on Article 4 in that area. And the Cross Gwynedd, unfortunately, it's only a very small part of the park that's in Dwyfor, just right in the very corner of Bedd Gelert and so on. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to take advantage of any funding there. There are other grants that we are looking at. We haven't submitted applications thus far, but we hope that there will be an opportunity to get some grants and an additional member of staff, possibly. That is work that is in hand. But if we assume that we cannot add to the capacity of the team to act this appropriately and accurately, as you can see in paragraph 8 onwards, there are implications on the preparatory work for the local development plan. I know that reviewing the local development plan is something that's very important to you as members and as officers and as an authority. We don't believe it's possible to do both. That capacity is just not available, and we accept that both matters are very important. The conclusion of the officers is, and the recommendation is, that we delay a year or pause the local development plan for a year, which will enable us to do the initial work on Article 4 accurately. I don't want to put the team under strain so that mistakes may happen. That releases capacity to operate well, accurately, and then for the team to be able to move to the local development plan. I appreciate the delay to the local development plan is not a perfect solution, and that we'd like to avoid that, but we can't do both. Essentially, that's the position we're in. Table 125 demonstrates the steps, and if you agree with this in principle, we will present a further paper either in January, hopefully, or maybe March, if we cannot quite finish the papers for January, setting out the detail, further evidence, equalities assessment, and a more detailed timetable also. That's the plan next. In January or March, there'll be further papers, and then we will give a 12-month warning that we are doing so. That is a statutory requirement, and we will publicly do so, and will consult in the spring. There is a risk. It's not referred to in the report, but if there is an election, there may be risks to the timetable because we can't go out to consultation during an election period. There are risks, but the intention is to consult early in spring before the summer, but please accept that there is a possible risk. And the proposal is that it becomes operational. Article 4 is in force by early 2025, and the timetable as revised for the local development plan is set out on page 126, and there is a delay of just over a year. The officers may not thank me for saying so, but I will do. If we can progress further on the local development plan, we will do so. And if there is less work on Article 4 than anticipated, that they can then start on the local development plan earlier. But that's the timetable that we anticipate. If it's possible to move things forward sooner, we will do so. 3 recommendations: support in principle, the need to do the preparatory work, which means presenting a further report either in January or March. And given the staffing implications in relation to Article 4, agreeing to delay the revision of the local development plan for the time being, and then the resources, continuing with discussions with Welsh Government and Cyngor Gwynedd to find long-term additional planning resources. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. Any comments?
I'd like to propose a recommendation, Chair.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr.
Not add to the recommendation, but to say that surely the work done for Article 4 some of it will have had to be done anyway in relation to the development plan. So I think we need to get on with it.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Just briefly, we have had internal discussions, lengthy internal discussions, and we are planning to do, I think Article 4 will help us with the plan. Doing the plan without knowing if we're doing Article 4 or not would confuse matters, so it will help. The first hand I saw was Dilwyn. I was going to propose, but I will second it then, and at the same time to thank you for the report. It makes total sense, and I agree entirely that we need Article 4 in place, which will facilitate the work. So I second that proposal. Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll go to vote. 3 recommendations there. Show of hands, please. In favour. Thank you. So 106, decisions for information, page 129. There is a hand up, Chair. In Sbwti Ifan, I've noticed that this situation has been existing for some months now. Is there a bit of a risk to the applicants that they lose their opportunity to agree to this? Is there a timetable or time constraints? It's been going on for months.
That's one of my cases. The section 106 is a non-severance agreement that the new dwelling is tied to the land.
I know that.
Yeah, it's with their solicitor at the moment for consideration. So, I mean, you're right, it has been going for quite some time. And it is of concern to me that it is taking time.
Yeah.
And you have to put a little bit of pressure on them to keep it moving.
Right, okay. Yeah, ask me to do that. Yeah. Now, a question, Lloyd, beyond
Question, what I was concerned about more than anything is that the right to agree is lost after a certain amount of time. The situation is, if it becomes clear that there is no progress whatsoever and that nothing will happen, the officers do have the right to say that we're going to pass the application back to them. So there is a risk. If we see that there is a delay on the solicitor's part or whatever, if there is an explanation, there shouldn't be a problem. But if they're just sitting on it, there is a risk. If I understand correctly, are you suggesting that I can put some pressure as a local councillor? I would think so. It's a process with the solicitors and not the authority, and it's their solicitors. There are a number of complications, especially if the mortgage company is involved, for instance, so it does take time. But our solicitor normally reports back to Richard to say, this is where we're at. And it's only if we have a concern that there is no movement whatsoever that the report would come back to you. Because at the moment you're not concerned, are you? If you, as a councillor, would like to have a quiet word, we wouldn't object. Of course, you're perfectly entitled to. I hope you understand what I mean. I'm not saying that you've been long, but I'm just seeing this situation just in case they lose out. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk? Item 6. Are the changes in item 6 to get rid of the garages to make the properties bigger? Does that mean there will be fewer affordable houses at this state then? Is it Llan? What's happened is the site is going over to the housing association. There won't be any change, no. That could happen, couldn't it? If people choose to add a number of rooms, it could change from being affordable to not being affordable. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Elfed. Anyone else? Over to page 130. Any questions there? If not, we'll move to 7.2, applications that without any decisions. 132. 133. 134. 135. We then go on to the delegated decisions for information. These are decisions that have been made. Any questions? Over the page, 138. 139. And 140. And 141. 142 rejected applications or applications that have been refused. Any questions? No? If not, there's an appeals decision. Jonathan, would you like to come in here? I don't know if you've read this. I think it's quite a strange conclusion, if I may say so publicly. Brian contacted me with concerns about this appeal also. I think that the inspector has interpreted the policy strangely or misinterpreted entirely. It does create a bit of a headache. There is no precedent. We will deal with similar applications as we've always done so in the past. But it does cause a problem to officers when people see the conclusion of this. If the committee is happy, I will be writing to the planning inspectorate questioning how they've reached the conclusion on this application. Yes, fine by me. How about the committee? Any comments? Do you support Jonathan? Agree. Any contributions? No? Okay. Thank you. And that's the committee at an end. Thank you. Can I draw attention before we conclude? There is an extraordinary meeting of the on a separate link. If we start at 12:30, if that's okay. Everyone agreed?